Today we're adding bends into our pentatonic scale to make it sound a little more interesting when we're playing guitar solos. The first thing you can do to sound better is to stop picking so much. That might mean sliding to the note, that might mean doing hammer-ons and pull-offs, but today it just means bending. When you learn how to bend, it sounds really bad, all right? It's one of the worst sounding practices you can do. It's like somebody that's learning to play the violin, which is just like screechy and atonal and noisy. Bending gets that way, and the reason is because you're going in between the notes. That's like jumping out of your safety net. On a piano, you can't go in between the notes. It's just one note to the next note. Whereas on a guitar, by bending, you're now leaving the home pitch, and you start getting into some really dangerous territory. So on a guitar, we have to train ourselves to bend things only in half steps and whole steps. So what we're going to do today is take a look at 3 notes in our pentatonic scale that are bendable and that'll sound good when we bend them. The first note that we're going to look at is on the 3rd string in A pentatonic minor. It's that note right there. It's the 7th fret on the 3rd string. I love bending this note because you can get away with bending it a half step, which is just 1 fret. Or you can get away with bending it a whole step, which is 2 frets. Now, I really encourage you to play your target note before you actually bend your note. So, for example, like, I'm bending the 7th fret, but I want it to sound like the 8th fret. So I'm going to keep playing the 8th fret over and over. I'm going to get that note stuck in my head. Dum, 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 dum. That's what my bend should sound like when I'm done bending it, all right? Same thing if I'm practicing a whole step. I want it to sound like that, so I'm going to try and hear that note in my head before I bend it. And you'll know if you underbend it or overbend it. For example, if I keep hitting my target note and then I do something like that, you can hear that's higher than I want to go. But if you're not hitting your target note first, you really aren't trained to tell if you're bending high enough or low enough. And bending's all about muscle memory. So if you're bending constantly and practicing to the wrong note because you haven't been checking to see if it's the right pitch, then that's a bad sign. So I always encourage you to play your target note first and then practice your bends. Okay, so what I want to show you now is just doing the half step bend on the 3rd string here. All right? And what that sounds like over the jam track. Now this jam track's available in the description. It's kind of an alternative rock thing. All right, it's a very simple bend, just a half step. Anybody can do that. All right? So you can hear it's got a lot of flavor to it. It's got a lot of attitude. That half-step bend is nasty. It's a grungy note. And just for a little theory here, that's a tritone note you're adding into the key, and that kind of makes it a blues pentatonic scale instead of just a regular pentatonic scale. It's kind of becoming a blues scale when you add that note in. But we can also bend it a whole step, and listen to what that sounds like. I think it's much more melodic. It's much more bright, and it sounds more like, I don't know, rockin'? I don't know. There's a lot of descriptors for it, but check it out. This is bending that same note a full step. Right? A lot less attitude, but it fits in better. Cool. All right, now, we'll stay in the same spot here for this next little trick. This is the only little trick I'm going to show you. We're going to talk about 3 bends, but then this one thing you can do on all the bends. It's just keeping the bend lifted up and then constantly picking it. And while you pick it, you can just release that bend. And it's an awesome move. I abuse this one. I really do. I do it a little too often. You can do it staccato so the notes don't ring out, or you could keep blasting away at the note. But either way, it's a nice little technique to use. So check it out in use. All right? Cool little move there. So moving on, we're going to go to the 2nd string, and we have this note on the 2nd string. It's the 8th fret, and that note can only be bent a whole step. If we bend it a half step, it's out of key, and it sounds really nasty in the key of A. So we're only going to be able to bend it so it turns into this note, an A. So I'm going to hit my A, and then I'm going to bend my note, and I'm going to practice hitting that exact pitch, not underbending it. You hear that? That's bending too low. That's bending too high. That's bending just right. And like I said, it's muscle memory, so you do it 100 times, and you really don't have to think about it. Your pinky will just automatically bend to that note. So listen to what that sounds like here now. I'll add in the 3rd string and the 2nd string for the same jam. I mean, that sounds good, and I'm not doing much. All I'm doing is these big, slow bends, picking things over and over again. There's no shredding going on here. It's simple picking and just some slow bends, but it sounds good. And that's the point. If you use things correctly, you don't have to, freak out on your fretboard just to sound melodic and tasty. All right, last part, first string, same exact concept. We can take this note, and we can bend it up a whole step. It's the 8th fret, and we can bend it up to make it a D. All right, like that. If we do it a half step, it's going to sound really bad. Actually, let me show you what it sounds like if you bend these notes under. And this is normally where people get discouraged. They start practicing bends, and they don't know why it sounds good. And it's because they're not quite getting that bend up high enough. And listen to what that sounds like if I just get in a half step instead of a whole step. That's bad. Nobody wants that, all right? Nobody wants to hear that. So definitely practice until you can get that full step bend. And it's hard on the first string, I get it. But, I remember learning this stuff and being convinced I would never be able to play it. For some reason, I kept doing it against, all of my natural inclinations. I just kept practicing it, and sure enough, it happens. And that's usually how most people are. If you just keep doing it, your fingers will learn how to do it. But it is frustrating, and it will sound bad when you start. I get that. But I also get that, you can do this if you just do it a few hundred times. So if you really think about what we've gone through here, we've got a bend on the 3rd string for a half step. We've got a bend on the 3rd string for a full step. We've got a bend on the 2nd string for a full step. And we've got a bend on the 1st string for a full step. And with just that, all right, I don't even think I'm going to play any 16th notes here. I'm going to put together a little bit of a lead just using those bends, and then this move we talked about, bending, holding, and then releasing, all right? And let's hear what it sounds like if I put those things together. All right, you get the idea there. It's got a lot more flavor to it, a lot more kind of goopiness, a lot more flow back and forth. It's not just so pointy. You're not getting stabbed with notes the whole time, And like I said, I think that's one of the first things you can do to start making your solos more interesting is stop picking. All right, slide, bend, hammer on, anything but pick. And bending is difficult, but I think this is a good place to start off. So, thanks for watching.